Today, we're talking about resolving communication issues. And this topic is so important to me because, as you may know, I specialize in marriage counseling, couples therapy, and many couples walking in the door when you ask them, what do you want to be different in your relationship? What's the biggest problem? It's communication, right? But what does that mean? It can actually mean a lot of different things. And how you resolve those communication problems depends on what the source is. So, on today's show, we're going to be doing a deep dive into how to resolve different kinds of communication issues so that you can improve your relationship, feel more connected, and just enjoy each other again. And I'm glad you're here with me today. If this is your first time listening, I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I am the founder of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching. I am a licensed psychologist. I'm a board certified coach. But most importantly, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I specialize in relationships. Even on the show, when we're talking about success and, how to grow professionally, there's often a strong relational component to that tied to emotional intelligence, self awareness. I mean, our relationship with ourselves is so important, and also with so many personal growth issues, how to have healthy relationships, how to feel good about yourself and your life. It all intertwines with our relationships frequently. So, that is often the topic of this show. But truly, if you are a growth oriented person, on a mission to create love, happiness, or success in any part of your life, this show is for you. And I'm here with you every week to help you do that. And have to tell you, so for today's show, talking about communication issues, just because I hear about it so frequently, I decided to take this to you. I posted one of my very favorite posts, quotes, I should say, on my Instagram page, which is George Bernard Shaw. His quote, "The biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's happened at all." I think those were words. I hope I didn't butcher that, but that's what it was. The idea that the biggest problem with communication is that we assume that things have been said or communicated, that they were received, that often weren't. Right? That is actually a major, major problem with communication in many relationships. People think they're communicating effectively and they're not. I am guilty of doing this myself. I could do it in my marriage with my husband. I believe we've talked about something, message sent, message received. That was not what happened. I think even in my role as a leader here at Growing Self, I am the boss of multiple people. And I've noticed over the years that I am clear about where we're going or what needs to happen, not always doing a really good job of making sure that that is understood on the other side. Those are just what small examples of all the ways that communication can kind of go sideways. And when communication isn't happening, when it isn't easy or when it's not effective, as you know, it can cause so many different problems in your relationship. And so today we're going to be unpacking it all. And I hope that by the end of our time together, you have a greater awareness of what might be contributing to relationship issues or communication issues, I should say, in your own relationship, and also have some takeaways for how to begin resolving them. So, as I mentioned, I took this to Instagram with this quote. I was like, okay, everybody, tell me about the biggest communication problems in your relationship. And I have to tell you, I was DM'd so many just interesting stories and cool things. And so for this episode, I have taken a collection of the responses that came back to me through social media, just so that we can address them, dissect them, and I bet that you can relate to a lot of these. I know that I could when I was originally reading them. So let's dive right in. I just shifted into presentation mode. If you are listening on audio players, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you should know that on the YouTube version of this episode, I've begun putting together little visual presentations to guide our conversation for my YouTube viewers. Come check it out over here. You can hang out with me in my office on YouTube sometime. But as you can see here, kind of put together a little guide to talk through different issues that can come up related to communication with listener questions and then advice for how to resolve all of them. And again, the thing that we need to talk about first are some of the hidden obstacles that will always get in the way of communication, because in order to improve the problem, you first really have to know what the problem is. And communication issues can be this catch-all for many different things going on in a relationship or even within yourself, right? I mean, for example, if you don't feel secure enough to share your thoughts and feelings in a really authentic and honest way, that is going to interfere with your experience of communication. You're not going to feel heard many times in the way that you would like to be. Um, other reasons for this, you might feel like you can't talk about important things in your relationship without it getting into a big fight. Like either your partner is going to be reactive about what you're saying or take it personally or be so obstructionist or invalidating that it's like you feel like you have to fight in order to be heard. That is a common obstacle when it comes to good communication. But here's the thing, is that communication issues in relationships are sometimes about communication skills themselves, right? Like, how do I say what I mean to say in a very direct way? How do I listen to somebody for the purpose of understanding without being so emotionally reactive? I mean, that can be a big barrier to communication. But what is also true is that sometimes the things we experience as communication issues in our relationships are not actually about the ability to communicate. Like, think about somebody who might really struggle to communicate with their partners or feel like communication is a big problem in a relationship, but is actually a really good communicator at work or with their friends, like having a very different experience there. But in our most intimate relationships where the stakes are highest, communication is different. It takes on different emotional connections and meanings, and it can become much more vulnerable. And becomes harder to be honest and authentic. So we can shy away from having the most courageous kinds of conversations with our most intimate partners. And communication in our intimate relationships can also become very fraught because it's in these relationships that we need the most emotional safety from our partners. And if we're not getting that in these moments, it can really turn what could have been a moment for communication that connects into not just failed communication, but an experience that actually damages the relationship itself. So it's really important to get this right. And we're going to be talking about all of it. As promised, let's dive in first of all to talking about the real obstacles to communication, because some of these may actually surprise you. We can make all kinds of attributes to what creates communication problems. Typically, if we're all being honest, what our partner is doing or not doing. Am I right? And I say this as somebody who's been married for a very long time. So, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, from my perspective, when communication goes sideways, it's my husband's fault, right? So, the first thing to know about communication problems is that it can be very difficult to, I think, understand how we are contributing to the communication dynamic. If you have heard this podcast before, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this relational dynamic that will always occur with two people that is self supporting, that how we show up, what we do, what we say, how we come across, it creates a reactive response in the other person. And then the other person is in this whatever state that we've contributed to creating, and we react to that. So there's this circular cycle of reaction that begins. What was very challenging for me to absorb and fully embrace over the years, I'm still working on it, is that I might say something, not thinking anything of it, and for some mysterious reason, my husband has a negative reaction to this. Um, so I have a fork in the road moment here. I could make it all about him, disempowering myself in the process and say, he's so reactive. He takes everything the wrong way. He's blah, 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 whatever, being negative. Not realizing how my initial communication with him contributed to that reaction. Now, it is all true that we all have our, storylines, our inner tapes, our ways of responding habitually that we carry from childhood all the way into adulthood and into our relationships with us. And so my husband certainly has that, as do I. But, where do you go with that? Like, how do you make that better, right? Certainly, you can do personal growth work on yourself. You can gain self awareness. You can build emotional intelligence skills. But I think the real first step in any of that is just deciding to take personal responsibility and ownership to the way that you are contributing to somebody else's reactions of you, rather than disempowering yourself by, making it all about the other person's shortcomings. And because when you do that, you're just you're a victim. You are being victimized by whatever this person is doing. You didn't have anything to do with it, which, in some cases, I don't know, maybe you are being victimized. Abusive relationships are a real thing. Domestic violence is real. And that's not what we're talking about on this podcast. What we're talking about in this podcast is normal garden variety relationships with communication issues. And with everything that I'm going to say next, it's going to be very important for you if you want to get the most of this, or really like any growth work, like even if you went to go see a therapist or a coach on your own or with your partner. None of that is going to help you unless you're able to consider what you are doing in the process of communication, because you can only change yourself. You might be listening to this podcast with very high hopes. I'm going to learn something about how to change the way my partner communicates, or they're going to listen to this and change the way they communicate. So obviously, like when we do couples counseling, that is one of the hopes, that two people will be growing together for the purpose of creating positive change in their relationship. And the way we get that ball rolling is by considering ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves. So, when we come into the real obstacles to communication, that's the very first big one that I want you to consider, is that the obstacle to communication may be that you aren't fully aware of how you are being perceived by the people that you are trying to communicate with. Huge growth opportunity. Fantastic idea to have a courageous conversation with somebody that you trust, to say, you know what, I would really like our communication to be better. I think that we could solve so many problems and feel so much more connected if it were easier for us to talk to each other. And I would love to get your feedback about how I come across to you sometimes. What are the things that I may be doing without fully being aware of them that make it difficult for you to communicate with me? and then brace yourself for the response. Because if you've done a good job of broaching this conversation with empathy and also creating a space of emotional safety where your partner is trusting you enough to be honest and authentic with you, you are now going to receive an amazing gift, which is the opportunity to get feedback and to maybe learn something new about yourself. But when it comes into the micro things that you might be hearing from your partner that are impacting communication, one of them is related to clarity. This sounds so simple, but is oftentimes at the root of a lot of communication problems. I've had this again in my own relationships, personally and professionally, and that's thinking that things are more clear to others than they actually are. So that you have a well developed idea and intention in your own mind. You think that's what you're saying. You expect that that is what is received. And other people are not understanding the same things that you are. So it's very important to just make sure that perhaps you feel like you need to over explain or provide more information, or use a fantastic listening technique, which is just so I can make sure that we're both, we have a shared understanding right now. What do you think that I just said? And not in a, crappy way, but like in a very genuine way. What did you hear me say? Because I want to make sure that you are understanding what I was intending, just so that we don't run into problems going forward. You have to be humble, I think, when you ask for that kind of clarifying conversation, but you would be amazed at how effective it can be, because many times the person that you're talking to is going to say, well, I heard you say XYZ, and you are going to realize that they did not take what you intended, and now you have the opportunity to do that differently. Another very, very common obstacle to healthy and constructive communication is related to mind reading or making assumptions, or projections for that matter. So, what this refers to is when you believe something about what somebody else is thinking or feeling or wanting or even preferring, and you base your communication on that. I already know how you feel, and I am now responding to what I believe you are thinking or feeling instead of what you are actually saying or doing. So it's like you're constructing your own story about what's going on inside of the other person, and then you are communicating in response to whatever that story is, which really derails communication. Either it stifles it, well, they already know all this, or they believe XYZ, or nothing's ever going to change, so what's the point in saying it out loud again, which limits actual communication. Or when you believe something, particularly something negative about another person related to their intentions, their core beliefs, how they feel about you, you will then react to that, typically with some degree of anger, hostility, resentment, hurt, right? That is coming from a construction of your own mind frequently. Now you're engaging with your partner in a way that is like, well, you just hurt my feelings because of what I believe about what you're thinking right now. And your partner is going to have a negative reaction to that, where they're going to say, what? Well, ugh. Now you have more negative things to react to, and all of a sudden you're in a fight. Many times when you kind of peel away the layers of where did this conflict come from, that's what it's about. It's your tone. It's, well, I know what you're thinking. It goes into all this stuff. So one really easy way of improving your communication immediately is being very careful that you are responding to what someone else is actually communicating to you, meaning like what they intend, what they are sending, without interpreting it through your own filter, particularly if that filter tends to be negative. So, ways of doing this is just ask. I'm feeling right now like you're communicating that you're angry with me, that you're XYZ. Is that true? And give them the opportunity to clarify for you so that you can be sure that you are understanding accurately what is actually being sent instead of what you think is being sent. Pro tip. Another thing that will always get in the way of communication, believe it or not, is a tendency towards superiority. This is a weird thing. So let me just unpack this a little bit. So, to have a superior or even supremacist orientation when it comes to relationships, what it really means is that somebody has decided, either consciously or not consciously, that my way of being is better, more important, correct compared to your way of being. And unfortunately, in big social groups, societies, people in power who believe that their way of being is better than somebody else's can do a lot of really bad things. And you see that played out in history, of course. But what also happens is that these superior orientations can and do show up in relationships in a way that really derails healthy communication. And this is something that I think we are all very vulnerable to because we all see the world through our own eyes, through the filter of our own life experiences, through our histories, right? That we have arrived at this moment in time where we believe some things to be true. And now are partnered with somebody who has a different life history, a different perspective, a different set of things that are important and valuable to them. Because of these natural differences, it's very easy to get into conflict where you believe that your perspective is the true one or the correct one. And so it's very, very important for all of us to have healthy communication, to be very open and affirming and not just tolerant, but also respectful and appreciative of other people's viewpoints, understanding that our own perspectives are just that, our own. All reality is completely subjective, right? And so you will immediately improve your communication when you get that about yourself. Here's the way I see this situation, but I know that this is coming from my preferences and from what I've been taught is like the right way to be. But I would love to hear more about your perspective and just to learn how you see this differently than I do, because I care about you a lot. And I know that I'm not empress of the universe and getting to decide what is correct and true, right? So it's like making space for someone. And this can be also, I just want to say out loud, very difficult to do. It can be very hard to see the world through somebody else's eyes, aka empathy. But that's very important. It's an important skill to learn and to practice and to deploy in your relationships in order to improve your communication. Okay, other major obstacles to communication are related to our own ability to manage our emotions. And when we struggle to do that, when we have emotional reactions to things that are happening that we can't quite handle or soothe, I guess, it turns typically into one of two things: either conflict avoidance, backpedaling, oh, that's not what I meant, nope, haha, that was just a joke, right? Anything to get out of what feels like an emotionally intense conversation. Or it turns into reactivity, that now I'm angry, how dare you, let's fight, right? And so both conflict avoidance or reactivity are related to emotional intelligence skills. Emotional intelligence, we think about that as being like good at talking to people or knowing what to say. There's actually four big components to emotional intelligence. And the first is self awareness, understanding how you're feeling in the moment. Am I angry? Am I feeling threatened? Do I feel like running away? What's going on right now? Self awareness plus the ability to manage those feelings. So I'm now coming back into equilibrium. Yes, I feel like running out of the room, and I'm not going to do that because I know we need to talk about something really important. I want this to be a positive conversation. So I'm going to calm down and I'm going to be present right now. Those are parts of emotional intelligence, and being able to do that will help you get out of a pattern of responding to any, triggering communication with either avoidance or reactivity. Of course, the other two parts of emotional intelligence are being able to have accurate empathy for what's going on with somebody else. That's psychological mindedness, where you're able to not just understand yourself, but really understand another person and their emotional landscape. And then, with all those pieces taken together, being able to know how to respond to them in a way that manages the relationship in positive ways, strengthens the relationship with empathy. So, emotional intelligence skills are incredibly important when it comes to healthy communication. Now, one other thing I do want to add is that sometimes communication can really be impaired actually by a lack of curiosity or certainly a lack of empathy. So, you know, I'm not sure how to say this, but there is a certain kind of person who tends to be just very matter of fact. The world is what it is. There's not a lot of curiosity around how things work or what's going on behind the scenes, et cetera, et cetera. And when that's present, it can impair communication because really deep and effective communication requires a fair amount of curiosity. It helps people go a little bit deeper into their experience, to talk more about how they think and feel, to get more information. And what happens when you have that is that it cultivates this very robust and accurate shared understanding. Like, why do you think that way? Or why did you say that just now? That kind of surprised me. Tell me a little bit more. Where is this coming from? Right? Like, those are doorways into deeper conversation. Um, and so, also, then the converse is that to have and embrace curiosity is a real advantage to cultivating the kind of communication that you want. So, without making assumptions about how other people feel, assuming this like stance of curiosity, that's interesting. Why why are you reacting to this, what I'm saying in this way? And again, not in a mean or resenty or grudgy kind of way, but in like a genuinely curious way. I said this, and then you had that reaction, and that surprised me. So tell me a little bit more about what's behind that for you, because I feel like maybe I'm missing something. If you're able to ask those kinds of questions or make those sorts of statements with a lot of emotional safety, you are creating an environment where somebody else can really open up to you and take you into their inner experience. And truly, that is the heart of really positive and effective communication, right? Additionally, there can also be an empathy factor when it comes to communications. If you have difficulty in either in understanding how you feel, or if you become so flooded and have difficulty managing that, you can become so self-focused that it's difficult for you to understand how other people feel because your own internal experience is so big and huge. So, this also, just to say, is something that can seem to happen with people who have ADHD. And I say seem to happen because people with ADHD can be extremely empathetic, self aware, emotionally intelligent people. And They may not always be fully present when you're in conversation with them. They may be thinking about something else, having inner experiences that are distracting them that they can't manage. There can also be a certain degree of reactivity in people with ADHD. So, if you, like me, have an ADHD diagnosis, that's also something very important to be aware of because it can really impact communication. And it's going to be important for you to create structural changes that will help you manage this differently in order to empower the kinds of communication that you want to have in your relationship. So, and now we're going to talk about the way of resolving these common communication issues using some of your questions as an opportunity to understand like what these actually look like and feel like when they're happening. So, to begin with, let's tackle something that can feel very challenging actually when communication issues are present due to what feels like differences in values. So, when I posted this question on Instagram, like, what are your biggest communication challenges? One of the responses that I got more than once was talking about how difficult communication feels when there is a vastly different point of view on things. And so, different examples of this that came in through Instagram, uh, different perspectives on what should be communicated, like what kinds of information are necessary or important to talk about. For some, it was like informational things. For others, it was like more emotional content. Another pain point, having a partner who did not consider it important to communicate certain things, like what time I'm gonna be home or how I feel about XYZ. Money came up around this topic. So, you know, people saying that finances are really important to my partner. He is happy to talk about this with me and feels like it's very important for us to be talking about these things all the time. But when it comes to like making plans and talking through like what we're going to be doing or what upcoming work schedules are, does not feel as important. And so, what came up for me in how to address this and how to improve communication when there are different priorities or points of view, like if we go into those main communication obstacles, I think what you can hear in this question, as I do, is that there is a superiority piece going on in different ways. One person believes that it's important to be making advanced plans and talking about this. The other person believes that it's important to be talking about finances, but not making plans in advance. And so, what this is saying is that there are two people who have things that are important to them and that feel like these are the important and appropriate things to be talking about with my partner. Um, but I am going to resist my partner's attempts to talk with me about other things that don't fit my map of the universe about what is important. And so, what happens is that it creates this closed off experience, a lack of empathy. I'm not really that interested in having this conversation with you kind of experience that really creates frustration. It creates hurt feelings, and it is a barrier to connection. These are, small examples. And when they habitually happen in a relationship over time, they'll actually create quite a bit of resentment because what each person is feeling over and over again is, the experience of being invalidated in a relationship in a way that feels really not just unpleasant, but like uncaring. Like, do you care about me? So, how to create connection in this situation would involve acknowledging those differences. One of the things that I would do is map out a something that's called a genogram, which is an assessment tool that marriage and family therapists use that really identifies family of origin, culture, different relationship dynamics. And the purpose of it is to bring into focus where each person comes from. What did they learn in their family of origin about what was important? And also, who are they as individuals and what are the things that are important to them, including, not just historical life experiences, but also even personalities. I mean, there are different personality types um, that are related to different, almost like emotional needs. To have somebody with a personality type that is like an advanced planner, I really like to know what is happening so that I can make advanced plans based on this knowledge. It is like just such a fundamental part of who they are that when they're in relationships with people who can't or won't or don't know how to communicate about future thinking, future planning, it feels very uncomfortable for them. Likewise, personality styles can be related to a lot of flexibility, spontaneity, people feeling stressed out when other people want to have conversations about them with making plans because they're like, I don't know what I'm going to feel like doing next Tuesday. And I'm going to be mad if I don't feel like doing what you're talking about right now. Then you're going to be mad at me next Tuesday when I change my mind. Like, it's actually extremely stressful. And so, again, the purpose here is to develop empathy and appreciation for each other's perspective in order to build bridges into the center. A lot of what we do at my counseling practice, growing self counseling and coaching, I mean, we're all licensed marriage and family therapists. And on top of that, we practice a very specialized form of coaching psychology. So, taking, the evidence based forms of resolving relational issues, plugging that into a really powerful coaching framework that goes into what are the goals? What are the obstacles? Where does everybody need to grow? Okay, let's do that, like in a very action oriented way. And that applies really powerfully to conflict and communication issues around finances, believe it or not, because when we talk about money as well, um, there's a lot attached to money, particularly the meaning behind money. Money is nothing. It's congealed energy, right? That's been created and now it's in a bank account. But what it actually means to people can be highly emotional. And so when there are differences around finances, like we can call those values differences, but like, yeah, let's unpack that. Let's go into a genogram and figure out where did this come from? How does this make sense? What did you learn about finances and how does it shape your worldview now? And let's dive really deeply into that. And now we're communicating on an entirely different level. We're not sniping at each other about who's doing what or what we should be talking about or not talking about or how you're talking to me. It's really going into this courageous conversation territory that requires all of the things that we talked about in the previous section. How to be really curious about how your partner feels and using empathy to understand why. Why does it make sense that my person is feeling this way? It also requires a lot of self management and emotional intelligence. Like, my partner is saying something that I disagree with or that challenges some of my old core beliefs, my map of the world, the things that I believe to be true. So, how do I keep myself calm so that I can be an emotionally safe person for my partner in this moment? And how can I also communicate clearly about the things that are really important to me? My partner, I know it's important for him for us to be having conversations about finances. I get that. I respect that. I can do that with him. But does he know that it's equally as important for me to have conversations about making plans into the future? Does he know what that's attached to for me emotionally or how I feel when we can't? And how do I help him understand in an emotionally safe way so that he can learn and grow, hear what I'm saying, understand what I'm saying, and that we can grow together to have a relationship that feels better for both of us. So if there's disconnect on any of those levels, communication is going to feel very hard, or that communication won't happen at all commonly. Another question that I got more than once was how to create connection with a partner. I had a number of people tell me that it felt like their most difficult obstacle to communication was simply feeling that there was this distance between themselves and their partner that they did not know how to broach. I had one person telling me, like, I don't even know what to say to my partner sometimes. I don't even know how to start a meaningful conversation. And I think that this is a skill that is learned, and it can be attached to many deeper things. Like there could be a lot of reasons why in somebody's life history, maybe they needed to be quiet when they were children, or maybe they had experiences where they were vulnerable in different moments and then wound up regretting it because it didn't go well for one reason or another. So definitely worth unpacking the why here. And if I was working with this couple as a couples therapist or as a relationship coach, I would love to unpack, what are the expectations here? If you're with somebody who's getting frustrated about just the lack of conversation, lack of connection, what are their expectations about what this should be like? It's probably connected to their culture, their family of origin, their life history. And again, going back to that skill of curiosity, of empathy, of being able to appreciate their perspective can really open so many doors. Additionally, by allowing them to understand your expectations. What was the chrysalis that I came from, right? What was communication like in my family? What are my life experiences that maybe make this hard for me? There is so much rich opportunity to unpack for the purpose of understanding each other on a much deeper level, and then being able to build bridges to the center. And what those bridges will look like in practice, of course, is doing things a little bit differently. Like if person A wants to have a conversation, they can initiate that. And here's some ways to do that. And also resourcing person B. Here are some ways to open up conversational doors. Here's some do's and don'ts. I mean, even as a quick example, like timing is so important when it comes to having meaningful conversations. To pounce on somebody like, hey, I want to tell you about this thing when they are in the middle of changing a diaper, taking a bath, like whatever, just to be sensitive to the environmental cues. And then furthermore, there are so many really like concrete and achievable things that can be learned around conversation skills, how to ask open-ended questions, what kinds of questions, creating structure in a relationship where maybe a date night is centered on let's have a meaningful conversation. These are the 6 questions I'm going to ask you tonight. If you had magical powers, would you go for invisibility or mind reading, and why? Or what did you imagine your life would be like when you were a child? How is it similar or different? And how do you feel about that? I mean, those kinds of open-ended questions that elicit emotional intimacy can be very powerful connecting tools, but learning how to use those with intention is really important. So anyway, those are just some strategies that can improve communication on that level by creating more of it and doing so in a way that is more meaningful. Another question that came up from social media was people wanting, and this was probably the most common, but really wanting and needing more emotional intimacy in their communication. I heard from a number of people who were in honestly like a lot of pain because they were partnered with someone who it felt like to them were not as advanced in their emotional intelligence skills as they were. And so they were in a position where they were able to communicate in a sensitive way, to listen in a sensitive way, to respond in a sensitive way. But they were doing so with somebody who had not yet had the opportunity to develop those skills in themselves, so that the person they were communicating with wasn't kind of bringing the same experience to the table. And that was hard. And I think that many people in relationships have that experience where one person is more developed in terms of their emotional intelligence skills than the other. Um, and I think one of the things that's hard is that emotionally intelligent, psychologically minded people can see that and understand that and have empathy for it, right? Which helps them maintain relationships with people because they have a lot of grace and compassion. Um, but over time, it starts to feel like their cup isn't filling up, that they're giving to others in the way that they want to be loved, but not getting it back. And so that is really difficult. It can lead over time to feelings of resentment, um, fatigue, right? When it feels like you're doing all the giving and you're not getting back what you really need to. I think in extreme cases, it can contribute to things like emotional affairs or attachments to other people if they're very real needs that aren't getting met in a relationship. So, diving into some of the reasons why, I mean, at the end of the day, it feels like your partner doesn't really understand you um, in the same way that you understand them. So it's important to consider what you want to do with this and also what your options are. But going back to our original segment where we were talking about obstacles to communication and also some of their antidotes, one of the most important strategies that I would advise, and so like if I were working with this couple, the first thing we would be doing is having courageous conversations for the purpose of creating a lot of clarity. Um, like in this question, I don't know if the partner on the other side who is being experienced as emotionally unintelligent, right? Do they know that that is how their partner is experiencing them? And that in order to have a positive and sustainable relationship, their partner needs them to develop these skills so that they feel loved and connected. So, is there clarity around what the problem is? And also, is there clarity around the significance of this and the importance of it? Like, I don't know if I can spend my entire life in a relationship where I'm not getting very basic, primary, like love language kinds of needs met from you, unless I know that you understand the importance of this to me and that you care about me enough in order to work on this so that I feel loved and respected by you and that I'm getting my emotional cup filled up here. Um, I don't know if that conversation has been had or if it has been attempted. Was it really understood on the other side? So that would be the first step, having lots of courageous conversations to ensure that shared understanding. And then once that understanding is there, provided that there is an interest in growing in that area, then it would turn into emotional intelligence coaching to develop skills and abilities in the other partner that they haven't yet had the chance to develop yet. But it would require understanding the risk to the relationship if that didn't happen. I will also add that emotional intelligence is actually quite coachable. Many people, in particular men, did not learn how to do the things that are required in high emotional intelligence. Unfortunately, even in this day and age, many men are socialized differently. Other things are placed as priorities for men so that they get channeled into all kinds of stuff that isn't emotional intelligence. And it's only until many times they arrive in adulthood and they are now in relationships or marriages with people who need a certain level of emotional intelligence in order to have a positive relationship. For many of them, that is literally the first time they're getting the memo that this is even a thing, that this is important, and that these are learnable skills that they can and should learn how to do. And then I would advise to partner with a relationship counselor who practices emotional intelligence coaching and have that be a big part of your work together. It will lead to more empathy on both sides, more accurate of understanding of like why this is an issue, but also a lot of opportunity, education, and accountability to be practicing the skills that is going to make this feel very different for both of you. And just in case you're listening to this and saying, well, I don't want to be the person that makes my partner change. They have to want to change. Yes, that is true. And I mean, if it makes you feel any better, literally zero people change unless they want to. So, you know, engaging in growth work is always voluntary. People have to want to work on themselves and, evolve in order for any growth work to be effective. And what is also true is that for most adults, their catalyst for growth, their motivation for growth comes from a desire to have better relationships or have better outcomes in their relationships. If we are just individuals sitting in a little room by ourselves, doing whatever we want to do, not having any feedback from other people, nobody changes. Why should we? Unless we have some, other thing that we want to work on. But it is only in our relationships where people love us enough and care about us enough to say, you're being a jerk right now, and I need this to be different because I love you and I know you can do better. Let's work on this. That is such a gift. That's where motivation for growth comes from. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you had a mindset of, well, they have to want to change, so I can't be the catalyst for growth in their life. If I heard that in the therapy room, I would want to talk about mind reading and mindsets and belief systems that got in the way of your empowered communication. Because if that is what you want and you're not saying that out loud to create clarity and understanding in your partner, you're contributing to one of those obstacles to communication. So I just want you to embrace that and use it as a doorway that opens up into growth for both of you. Okay. So, yet another question that came from social media. So I, put this out there. What are the biggest problems? Communication in your relationship. And I actually heard back from a number of people who were describing what sounded to my ear like much deeper issues than just communication problems. So one person said, how do I communicate with somebody who has a highly avoidant attachment style? I think they're actually a narcissist. They don't have empathy for me. They don't understand my perspective, or they don't want to. They look down on me, and I basically feel like they do not care about me at all. How do I communicate with somebody like this? So my response, my thought was, why would you want to? So, like literally, and I don't mean this to sound flip, but why would you want to work that hard to try to communicate or be understood by somebody who is showing up in this way in a relationship with you? Now, if you're having some of these experiences but aren't sure, like, is this a hopelessly avoidant person? Is this person a stone cold narcissist who is never going to be different? Get that in front of a good marriage counselor who can help you get clarity on what you're dealing with here. Because, if that's the case, nothing is probably going to change. And I think it would probably be very valuable and productive conversations for you to be having with a good therapist about why you're seeking out and attempting to maintain relationships with people who are not able to love you and care about you in the way that you deserve. So that is a very important personal growth opportunity. Goes back to, your relationship with yourself and how you take care of yourself relationally. That would be very, very rich work to do. Um, so just to pay attention to this. Now, it is also true, and I'll just put it out into the air, that if you do tend to be anxious in relationships, if you've had negative experiences with other people in the past, you might want things from other people that are um, kind of over and above normal expectations in terms of validation, communication, being praised, having positive things reflected back at you, lots of like showering with love. And when you don't get those things, you may interpret that as this other person is a narcissist, when in fact they are not. So again, it's important to do an assessment here and just to see what's happening, particularly before you begin throwing the N word around. So just to get clear about the reality, go to a therapist, say, I think this is what's going on. Is this what's going on? And if so, what are the opportunities for improving this? Either if it's, my perceptions are a little bit off because I have expectations of things that are maybe a little skewed, or am I in a relationship with somebody who is incapable of caring about me? And if so, just what to do about this. That's pretty easy, but like how do I not do this again would be the real question. So there are a lot of growth opportunities, and I think for many people, doing work around, is this well actually dry? Is this never going to be different? And so, what would it mean for me if I needed to cash out my chips and go home rather than continue fighting to be seen, heard, cared for by somebody who is not capable of doing that? It may take you in a different path. The goal reaching out to me was, how do I communicate about this person? But I'm in the personal growth business, not necessarily the all people need to stay together all the time business. I think for many times, and while I'm certainly very pro relationship and especially marriages with children, I mean, I think that people do actually have a responsibility to try as hard as they can to have a positive relationship and work through things. I think that's always very positive. But I think we also need to make some choices and use discernment about who we want to do that with versus, people where there's not actually opportunity. Going back to that, Seth Godin. I don't know if you guys know Seth Godin. He's a writer. He's done a ton of great work. One of my favorite books, though, he's typically known for his work in like the marketing sphere, but he wrote this fantastic book called The Dip. And the premise of this book is how to make really hard decisions about whether or not you should persist, like in a relationship, in a career, in a whatever, or when is it time to call it quits? And so his model is to figure out, is this a dip? Or is this a cul-de-sac? Or am I going off a cliff? Like those are the three choices. So a dip is when something feels really difficult. Many things, usually the most important things in life, can feel difficult. Like having a great marriage will always, invariably feel difficult at some point. And that means you've entered a dip. And that invites you to learn, grow, develop, make changes, make improvements. And that when you go through that dip and up the other side, you have created a situation that is much better than the original one. And it's like there's opportunity there. It's worth doing the work. There are other situations that Seth Godin titled the cul-de-sac, where no matter how hard you work, how hard you try, you can kill yourself, you can bleed all over it. It's not going to change. It's not going to be different. And so the skill is recognizing those cul-de-sacs as fast as you can and getting out of them as fast as you can. There is a third type, going off a cliff. And that's where it's fine, it's okay, whatever, until all of a sudden it's really not anymore. And the example would be like Continuing to smoke cigarettes, which is perfectly fine for most people for at least a couple of decades until they die of cancer. So that would be an example of a cliff and how to make decisions. It's like, I know this isn't going to end well eventually. Doesn't hurt this much right now, but I don't see a positive future. And then using that awareness to make decisions too. So those are things to pay attention to. And I hope that it was helpful for you as we talked through these questions. I know we got into a lot of different things, but that was kind of the point of this whole podcast. I mean, communication issues is an umbrella term and one that we use to describe so many things going on in our relationships and in ourselves, actually, from disconnection to reactivity, values differences, differences in expectation, cultural differences, and even our own anxieties about being loved, being lovable. And most advice about improving communication is prescriptive, right? It's do this, use a soft startup, say please and thank you. And that's very worthwhile. But what I really wanted to create for you today was an understanding of the deeper issues that are often underneath communication issues, because it's only by addressing those and then going through this transformational growth process that on the other side of that, you'll know what to do. You will have been changed. You will have just created this different understanding, this different way of being that will help you create a very different experience in the end. That's what I believe you deserve. That's what I want for you. So that's why I wanted to talk about the things that we did today. And I hope that this has been helpful for you. Very lastly, I did put together some action steps and additional resources. So, resources for you. I have created so many free resources for you on my website, growingself.com. I have so many different resources available for you on my website. For my friends on YouTube, I'm hopping over to my website for just a second to show you. First of all, you can come over to this free resources tab and check out this How Healthy is Your Relationship quiz that I've developed for you. You and your partner can answer like 20 questions about the state of your relationship, including a bunch of questions related to communication and how that's going. It will build a customized report for you. And the cool thing is that if you and your partner do this together, it can be a really lowball, low-key way of broaching courageous conversations about what's working for you in terms of communication and what isn't, for the purpose of developing a shared understanding of what kind of changes you would each like to see in your relationship. So you can go to growingself.com/relationship-quiz to access that. Take the quiz and get the report. Additionally, I have so many free resources for you on my blog and podcast. So growingself.com/blog-podcast. If you go into the Love collection and scroll down, I would love for you to enter into the Communication That Connects collection. And there you will find so many articles that I've written on the subject of healthy communication, also articles that my colleagues, other MFTs here at Growing Self Counseling and Coaching, have written, including how to have difficult conversations, what to do if you're feeling invalidated, what to do if your partner is always upset or feels like they're always shutting down. You can find the latest posts that I have there for you, as well as a podcast, curated podcast collection that I've put together for you on Spotify that just has a ton of different podcasts that I've created over the years on the subject of improving your communication. And do not forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify while you're there so that me and you can stay connected. So those are resources that I have put together for you. And certainly if you would ever like to connect with me or another one of the marriage counselors that I know and trust here at Growing Self, you're welcome to come over and request a free consultation meeting to talk about your hopes and goals and how we can help, because we're here for you. Okay, thanks for doing this with me again today, and I'll be back in touch next week with another episode. So until then, take care.